Good morning and welcome to Real Divorce Talk San Diego. We are glad to have you guys with us. My name is Lynn Waldman. I'm a divorce coach and therapist, and you can find more information about me at my website, divorcecounselingcenter.com. And I would like to introduce my co-host today, Shawn Skillin, family law attorney, and her website is shawnskillinlaw.com. And Mark Hill, a certified divorce financial analyst with PAC Divorce Management, and his website is pacdivorce.com. And we are super excited to have a special guest with us today, Tina Mears. Tina is the Executive Director of Cooperative Parenting, and Tina facilitates workshops for parents who need to and would like to learn how to co-parent more effectively. So we are going to be hearing a lot more from Tina today about cooperative parenting. But first, I would like to remind everyone we have a divorce options workshop. It is the first Saturday of every month from 9 to noon. And the next workshop is July 6th. And we know that's a holiday weekend, but we want to get the word out for people who are thinking about divorce. We know that is stressful, so we are working that holiday weekend, and we will be talking about how you get through the divorce process. And it's located in Carmel Valley. If you would like more information, our website is collaborativefamilylawsandiego.com, or you can call 858-472-4022. So please feel free to write in with any questions that you may have, and we will do our best to answer your questions. So our topic today is cooperative parenting or not. So Tina, we would love to hear about cooperative parenting, your classes, how it works, what can people expect. Tell us a little bit about cooperative parenting and what it is.
You bet. Thanks for having me. I
Certainly.
appreciate it. So Cooperative Parenting San Diego are co-parenting workshops for separating or divorcing parents who are really struggling in their communication and relationship with each other. We have parents who volunteer and want to improve their co-parenting. We also have parents who are mandated by the courts. And so we are approved by the courts from low to high conflict. When we do give a certificate at the end that they can file, give to their attorney, or file with the court system. And so what you can expect is really looking at yourself and identifying what are my next steps in this co-parenting relationship. The biggest thing we stress the most is that you don't have control over anybody else but yourself. And so really that self-reflection on what are my next steps, how do I need to educate myself, what are the solutions I can work on to create a more peaceful relationship with my co-parent. Because in the end, the children are watching and we need to do it for them.
So that's interesting that you do have some clients that are actually court ordered to attend your classes.
Right.
And in how many weeks is the class?
It's 3 weeks, so it's 3 classes. They're 2.5 hours each for a total of 7.5 hours.
So folks do end up with a certificate of completion.
Yes.
That they
yes,
can
they
use.
do. And I should note, only one parent attends a particular workshop. Typically, the conflict is fairly high, and so it's important that whoever is in the class is calm enough and able to learn and process the information. And so we do have only one parent in the class.
I think it's interesting also that you have a range of high conflict to maybe low conflict.
Yeah.
And so tell us a little bit about the curriculum and what people could expect to learn.
Absolutely. So we talk a lot about how to manage yourself in difficult situations, and we can do that by how we interpret what's in front of us. And so really taking the time to slow down and be more mindful and practicing these skills on when something happens with your co-parent, how do you take that pause to be able to really think before responding or reacting. So for example, if someone keeps doing the same thing, we have a tendency to say, oh my gosh, I can't believe he or she is doing it again. We get upset, the emotions go up, we stay stuck in it. Versus if we're able to say, okay, I can sort of expect this to happen. So preparation, learning how to prepare for a situation with your co-parent, whether it's just picking up the phone or a drop off or pickup, and then being able to really choose how you respond to that is important.
Is there a cost involved in the program?
There is. We use a sliding scale, and we
Okay.
base it off your gross household income. We want to be able to serve the whole community.
Right.
Yeah.
And so are they kind of rolling like every Wednesday night, and you can just like pop in, or it's every fourth week, I guess, classes would start over?
It's a set curriculum. So every month there are the 3 classes. So there's usually a week or 2 that there's no class, and then we'll start up again in the next month, depending on holidays and things I kind of schedule around that. So it might be 3 Tuesday evenings in a row or 3 Thursday evenings in a row.
And where in town could folks expect to get a class? North County?
All the above.
Mission
So
Valley.
we offer the classes in Chula Vista, La Mesa, Claremont Mesa, and then San Marcos right now.
Great, great,
Yeah.
great. So clients are actually learning tools and skills that they could take with them, not only to use with their co-parent, but in life.
Absolutely, these are life skills. We all have people that difficult people or people that we have to be around. So these are absolutely life skills to learn.
I think giving clients the tools to have the interruption before the reaction. It's so easy to send a text today. I can ignore a phone call, but I'm going to see a text. If I know I'm in conflict with someone, I can ignore the phone call. I can say, okay, well, it's not a good time for me to talk to them right now.
Right.
I'm going to back off. But the text comes through, and I've got to react to it in a way. I mean, it's almost like, what if I don't react? It's like I know what's being said.
Right.
So how do you help people with those kind of challenges?
Well, it's interesting you say I have to react, where we would
I feel I have to react.
Right, we
Yeah.
practice.
Yeah.
I feel that we have to react
Yeah.
now, because then we're coming from emotion. I have to react because they're waiting for me, or what are they going to think about me if I don't? And
Exactly.
so, how do you not respond to that text right away? Because they don't know what you're doing. You're working. You might be, taking a shower. I don't know. And so, can you take the time to calm your nervous system down to be able to respond to that text in an effective way instead of a quick, the conflict piece.
Right, really.
So, yeah. So it's a tough skill. It's really hard because there's so much emotion. There's so much hurt and anger going on. We get defensive. We want to prove our point, and we're asking everybody to slow that way down and to be
And the other
very more
person knows
conscious.
exactly how to push our buttons.
They do.
Even if they're not trying to.
Yeah.
They do it
Right.
sort of naturally. Yeah.
Yeah, these people have been around each other for a long time.
Exactly.
They know each other very well.
Yeah.
We actually talk about how if you choose to have your buttons out, they'll get pushed. But if you choose to keep them in, they often won't get pushed. And we don't realize the power our brains have over situations in our environment. And we just react, and we're so high emotion. But if we can tap into our brains and how much power they have, we very much can take that pause to say, you know what, I'm just going to take a minute to relax before I respond, because my children need me being my best self.
I really love that, because that really teaches clients that we can control our behavior and our emotions with our thoughts, just rethinking something and maybe having a different perspective.
Right. Yeah, it's all about how we interpret it. And we all grow up with so many different interpretations depending on our childhoods and the messages we received growing up and what still plays out in our lives today. And we don't realize that they can be dysfunctional. And so being able to identify it and kind of shift them back into being very more reasonable, logical, helpful thoughts and interpretations, it'll guide our choices much better.
So how are clients different? What have you seen as far as they start the class and they might be emotional, like you said, triggered by their thoughts and feelings? So how do you see them change or transform their co-parenting relationship from when they've started the class till they finish the class and afterward? What have you seen typically?
Right, they do come in fairly emotional, wanting to tell their whole story, and he or she did this. And one part is I don't let them, because one, we don't have the time, and two, every time you go down that road, all the emotions go up and we get stuck in it. And so, but inevitably that happens, and so I pull them back. But over time, as that point is stressed and the self-reflection point is stressed, and that we don't have a control of how the other person is, and really when we look at how much our behavior as parents affect our children, that's when that shift starts to happen. so often we think it's just the other person who's doing something, and we have all these rationalizations to make that true. And then once we can really look at ourselves, even if you think you're doing everything right, the way the class proceeds and how the curriculum is built is for that slow readjustment of looking at yourself in the process. And so many parents say, you know, I didn't realize that even my behavior could be hurting the kids, or shifts that they need to make in how they think about their co-parent or how they're progressing could be more helpful for the relationship.
Do you see any kind of seasonality to the way parents get along? I mean, I've seen stress going into the holidays, but also recently I've had a couple of calls from people about newly separated, divorced people having to deal with a summer with children when there's suddenly no school to send them Monday to Friday.
Yeah.
And the challenges around agreeing what camps, who's going to do what, really seems to escalate in the summer of the first or second year after a divorce. Have you noticed that at all?
Yeah, absolutely. Summertime, holidays can be difficult, and then any time parents go back to court, the emotions tend to increase and it gets harder. But yeah, it's interesting watching that. And so courses more for summer and how that's going to be, because often the parenting plan shifts from, you know, to week on, week off, and that just changes everybody's kind of lifestyle and routine. And so how that works can be challenging for parents. Yeah.
And I've noticed that parents will sometimes have this sense of it's not fair, or a sense of injustice. And, you know, having a parenting plan and taking co-parenting classes, like this kind of like colors their...
Well, divorce is not fair.
Right.
You know, I mean, one of my favorite authors is a guy called Scott Turow, and he writes Pleading Guilty, Presumed Innocent. You may know some of those movies. His most recent book, about a year ago, the protagonist is going through a divorce, and he's a lawyer. And he says at one point, not a divorce lawyer, but he says at one point, she doesn't love me anymore. That was an injustice for which the law had no soothing response. And I love that line because it puts it in perspective of, we expect, at least some of us expect, that the law will give us justice. That it's kind of Al Pacino out there, justice for all, and this is, you know, not the experience people have when they go to court in the divorce or the family law field.
Yeah, court does not help you resolve all the, you know, emotional damage, hurt,
It'll give you a decision.
grief, you know, that's going on in a divorce. It resolves legal things, and it doesn't really help. Does part of your curriculum address not just their self-management, like how to deal with the kids? Because, you know, one of the most frequent questions I get in mediation is, what if the kids don't want to go to dads or moms? You know, what am I supposed to do? And so, you know, do they address some of that stuff?
A little bit, not a lot. We certainly address how to keep kids out of the middle and not have them as messengers and secret keeping and all of that. We do address that a little bit. You know, something like that might depend on age and, you know, not wanting to go. And but no, not in detail. But I do have in my resources books, co-parenting books and things like that for people to read and
so if they're really looking more for like how to be an effective parent with the child instead of a co-parent with the other person, then you would refer them to books or maybe other actual parenting classes.
Right, parenting classes, other therapists, co-parenting experts, right.
Because my response to them is always, do you let them choose whether or not they go to school?
Right.
You know, you create this expectation from the beginning that, you know, the child will go to the other parent's house just like they will go to the school, or they will go to soccer practice, or they'll go to Sunday school on Sunday. And so, and it's kind of funny because people look at me and they go, oh yeah, okay. You know, it's like your 5-year-old doesn't have this choice, your 15-year-old doesn't have this choice about going to school. So
in fact, I've had psychologists tell me that that is actually very scary to children. When they find themselves in control, they have an intrinsic understanding that they really shouldn't be in control, even though they want to fight for it. And that if you give them that, they're like, I'm a kid, I shouldn't be doing this, making these decisions.
And something we do talk about within that idea is that if they do have to go, how can we help them go? How can we help them communicate with the other parent about what they're dissatisfied with? Can they take something along that would be comforting for them? So things like that, because it's a little challenging because I can't tell them what to do, you know, but but we talk about how do we respect the parenting plan or respect the relationship with the other parent. And then always, it's all also a learning lesson for the kids. Like talking about boundaries and communication and relationships. They're great learning opportunities to have with their children about how to help them get there.
Do you have classes that the children will come to, or this is just parents?
Just
right?
the parents.
So the kids are not involved?
Correct.
And so what programs do you recommend if the children can use help in this area?
There's Kids Turn, and it's a wonderful program. It's been for a very long time.
Yep.
And so that's really the only one I know. There might be more out there, but that's the one that's highly recommended.
So some schools have a program called Banana Splits, which is like a lunchtime thing or whatever with the school counselor and thing, and that is for kids who are going through a divorce.
Oh,
Some
okay.
churches will have programs for parents and kids that are going through divorces, but I do know that I can't remember what school it was. I think there's a couple of schools in San Diego that have this Banana Splits program, which I think is really helpful for kids to know that they're not the only ones going through divorce. There's other families going through divorce, and find out that their experience isn't something like unique and horrible and something to be ashamed of.
Right.
And you know, that really kind of speaks to, I think, the fact that divorce is trauma, just because it's an upending of the family's life, their routine. And in co-parenting, what I have found too is sometimes when there's been like one primary caregiver and the other parent maybe has been working or supporting the family, that just that shift, that now that parent who is working is going to be stepping up to the plate more and more involved with the kids, is difficult for the parent that was the primary caregiver, because they get very attached to that role. And in divorce, people's roles change. So I imagine that's something that you also address in cooperative parenting, you know, how dad might now be stepping up to the plate because he wants to be more involved and the roles have changed.
Yeah, right.
The other challenge, though, there's sometimes, because of the way the family law system works in California, is that the reason dad wants to step up to the plate is he thinks it'll save him money in support payments. And so how do you get to the motivations behind what drove the parenting plan in the first place?
Right.
I mean, that must be challenging when it's obvious to you there was an additional, and I'm not picking on men here, there can be motivations to the female side too.
And I think that's where that sense of this isn't fair, this is an injustice comes from. And like letting that go.
Right.
Yeah, we have a new case. I was working with a colleague of mine, and we're trying to do like a mission statement. This is what we're trying to do. And the husband comes up with this thing about and wife bursts into tears. It says he hasn't behaved that way at one point in the marriage. I don't believe for a second he'll do it now. So the hurt and the emotions that people are going through at this point, and the questioning of the motivation of why the other spouse wants A, B, or C, because trust has been broken.
Right.
So that must be really hard to deal with when you're talking about parenting and there's sort of amorphous third party out there that you have to be concerned for, but it's not in the room.
Yeah, absolutely. Roles definitely change. And to start, some parents are very child-centered. Some parents struggle with that. And there's a lot of parents who are extremely child-centered, but because the emotions are so high and the roles are changing and all of that, that they sort of forget, you know? And so I always tell them, all of that stuff that's changing and all of the anger and the hurt has to be processed. We don't necessarily have time in the group, you know, because those are bigger healing experiences that need to happen with a therapist or trusted people in their life. But these are people who, really good people, really good parents, who have to then reshift back into, okay, hold on, how do I compartmentalize all of this adult co-parenting stuff to be able to be an effective parent with my children? And so that's a process. So this isn't something that they can just come to one class and just accept and go, okay, this is all right, even though it's not fair, even though this isn't unjust, I'm okay, I can accept that. But that's kind of the long-term goal that we talk about, is to be able to work your way to that, because most likely that person's going to be in their life for the rest of their life.
Exactly, and people don't realize that so much. You know, if you, once you have a child, you lose control of a lot of things.
Yeah.
Eventually they'll have children, or they won't have children. Not your decision when or if, but when it happens, you are tied to that person, and you're tied to their other grandparent too. And so You know, I've told this story before. You know, a client in her 40s wouldn't get married, even though she had a long-term relationship, because she said, I invite dad, mom won't come, and vice versa, and they've been divorced 25 years, you know, and they're still fighting about it.
Right.
So the impact is even not just on young children or children below the age of majority, it extends into adulthood.
Right.
Adult children struggle with things too when their parents are divorcing.
Yeah.
Which is why I think it's so helpful for people to seek out therapy and go to therapy. And I realize that divorce is expensive. They've already spent maybe tons of money on attorney's fees and whatever else they needed to get through it, but it just seems like, you know, it's that emotional piece, because we always say divorce is legal, financial, and it's emotional, and it's so easy to forget about that emotional piece, but then that's what's driving your decision making, your co-parenting. So, you know, I'm always an advocate for getting into therapy, even if you go briefly, just to kind of process what's going on.
Right. Right. And that's
So how do you handle resistance to that? I've come to the conclusion that the degree to which a client resists help from the mental health field is directly proportional to the
amount of help they need.
Yeah. No, really. You know,
Right,
it's a
right,
facetious comment,
Yeah.
it sounds
Yes.
like, but it's true.
It's like-
The more people push back against, we tried that, we went to, you know, that was a total disaster, we just fought more, you know, I'm not doing that again, sort of thing.
I think, you know, I always tell my clients, at least in relation to the kids, I always tell them that the kids are going to take their cues from you as parents. So if you're being anxious, the kids are going to be anxious. If you're being fearful, the kids are going to be fearful. If you're being angry, the kids are going to be angry. So, you know, I say it's fine to have all those emotions as long as you got, you know, like, well, should I not cry in front of the kids? Yeah, you can cry, but say, you know, mommy's okay or daddy's okay. I'm just having a bad moment. I'm going to cry it out and I'm going to be fine in 10 minutes.
Right.
That's okay. But I always say wherever you need to get help, whether it's from your church, your best friend, you know, therapy, you know, I can give you references to books. You know, I just encourage them to get help somewhere,
Yeah.
because not everybody is comfortable with therapy, unfortunately. I think it's helpful for a lot of people, but I try and turn it around, like, if you don't process this, it's going to affect your kids, which it totally does. I mean, I'm involved in a couple of cases right now where the parents are telling me that one of the children is really struggling with being protective of the parent. In one case it's the mom, and in one case it's the dad. And, you know, to me, that means that parent is putting off this vibe somewhere that they need to be taken care of and protected. And the kid has now taken on this job. And, you know, with the dad, the little girl's worrying that daddy's not going to eat and take care of himself and have food in the fridge and, you know, things like that. And the little boy's trying to protect his mom from being lonely and scared. And that's not their job.
No, no.
So when parents start telling me stuff like
Yeah.
that, it's like, you know, you need to figure out how to deal with your own stuff, so that's not what you're projecting onto your kids.
Right.
And I think that's, you know, parents in divorce have so many emotional things going on that they're so focused on their own stuff that the kids do sometimes fall through the cracks, you know, and they forget that the kids, as you said, Lynn, are going through all these emotional adjustments too. So it just, I think if everybody could get a little short-term, you know, divorce coaching or therapy or
Right.
whatever you want to call it. I mean, it's just, it's a period of your life where it doesn't come with a manual. Most people don't have previous experience with it personally. They've seen friends go through it maybe, or maybe their parents were. I mean, it's just seems so practical to me that you would want to talk to a therapist or somebody who's an expert in, you know, the things you're going to feel, the things you're going to go through, how the stages are going to work, and get some
And
help.
it's a little more, it can be more targeted, I think, than, and that's an easy way to present it to some clients. This is not, you know, we're not going to start talking about perhaps what happened immediately back in your childhood. We're going to deal with more of the immediate issues. We're going to deal with how you're going to get through this. And that may be a softer sell in a way. And some people, because they're so resistant to, you know, therapy because they've had bad experiences of marital therapy not working. And so they have this perception therapy doesn't work because we tried it, you know. I get that all the time, I will tell you.
And I think
usually
that's-
from guys.
I
you know.
think that's exactly right, and they don't realize that the trauma is being compounded for the kids when they're when the kids are feeling responsible for the parents' emotions and to feel better. And you know, our saying, our mental health saying is it parentifies the kids, and we don't want them in a parental role. We want them to be kids. And I think that's a great way to present it, Mark, to clients, is that we want them to learn new skills. It's not necessarily that we're going to go back and debrief all your trauma from your childhood, which will be painful and feel overwhelming, but that we can start with skills so that you can just have a way of behaving differently, very similar to what they're learning in cooperative parenting.
Right. That's why I commend so much any parent who does pick up that book or come to the class or go to therapy, because it's challenging, especially after long days, and sitting in a class would not be their first choice typically, but they're there and it's inspiring.
And we kind of think we know how to be parents.
Right.
Darn it, I've been a parent for 15 years, or, you know, I know how to parent. What do you mean, teach me how to parent? Well, yeah, but you don't know how to parent in this new sort of reformed family environment.
Right. Right.
And it is really different. I mean, you know, I talk about that a lot in our mediations. You know, when you were married, one of you still may have been more of the boss with the kids than the other, but now you've got two households, and you're the boss in your house, and they're the boss in their house, and they get, you know, usually the primary parent gets very focused on, well, they have to have the same rules, and we have to have this, and I'm like, they have different rules at school, they have different rules at soccer, they can have different rules at Sunday school, you know, they'll adapt to that kind of stuff. You really do have to kind of take this focus away and say it is different parenting. Like you need to discipline. If something happens, they hit their little brother, let's say, and you need to put them in a timeout or take away their phone for a couple days, you've got to discipline within your household. Because if you say you're on restriction for the rest of your life, and then they've got to go to the other parent's house, and the other parent doesn't have any problem with what happened or doesn't think it's as big a deal, then you kind of lose some of your authority. So we talk about disciplining in your own house, whatever it is, the punishment has to, you know, stay within your home. And, you know, the little kids, what are they going to do when they're 5 and 7? There's nothing a 5-year-old, 7-year-old is going to do that warrants them being on restriction until they're 30.
Right.
You know, I said when they're teenagers, when they're teenagers and you have to deal with sex, drugs, rock and roll, and God knows what else nowadays, then I say you guys have to have a discussion and come up with a disciplinary measure that you'll both carry out. Or the kid just learns how to work both ends against the middle, and then they get away with murder, which they don't like. They'll turn around as adults and tell you, I didn't like that. You know, I felt abandoned. I didn't want to make those choices.
Right. Back to what I was saying.
They won't say that in the moment. They think they want that control, but at the same time, they feel a little abandoned and neglected because they'll take advantage of all that freedom, but they won't really make the right choices, and they later verbalize that they didn't really like it. They wanted their parent to step up and set some boundaries.
Right.
So I want to remind our viewers, we do have the Divorce Options Workshop the first Saturday of every month from 9 to noon, and the next Divorce Options Workshop is July 6th. If you guys have questions, please give us a call at 858-472-4022, or visit our website, collaborativefamilylawsandiego.com, and because we would love to answer what questions you may have about the divorce process and how to get through it with minimizing trauma to you and your kids. And we have Tina Mears with us today, the Executive Director of Cooperative Parenting, and we are talking about how parents can cooperate and parent more effectively for the sake of the kids and themselves. So what is the difference, would you say, between parallel parenting and just cooperative parenting? From a legal perspective, is there a legal perspective on that, Shawn?
Well, from a legal perspective, there's all kinds of different parenting plans. And so, you know, where are the kids Monday, Tuesday, Wednesday, Thursday, Friday? What do you do on the holidays and things like that? If somebody is very cooperative in their parenting and the parents are getting along, you know, kind of the structure around that parenting plan can be a lot looser. If parents are more high conflict and they aren't getting along, then the structure of that parenting needs to be much stricter. So there's fewer ways for them to argue. And so the idea of parallel parenting is for high conflict couples. In order to keep the kids out of the middle, in order to expose the kids to less anxiety and conflict, the idea is that when the kids are with mom, the kids are with mom, and dad stays out of it. And when the kids are with mom, or did I say that all right? Mom, dad stays out of it. When they're with dad, mom stays out of it. So if they're at dad's and there's a piano recital, there's a dance recital, a little league game, a softball game, whatever, then dad goes to the game and mom stays away, and vice versa when they're with mom. The exchanges are always at school or daycare or something like that, so that there's fewer times where the parents are in the same place, likely to get in an argument and expose the kids to anxiety and conflict. And because that's what the kids don't like. And that's what we know from all the research is harmful to the kids. So parallel parenting is for those kids that can't sit in the same baseball stands together and can't get along. And so really texting, phone calls, all of that stuff is minimized from the parent who doesn't have the custodial care of the kids in the moment. And so they just kind of let each other do their own thing and they just stay out of it. So it's not the ideal situation, but it does help lower anxiety and conflict in a case where the parents are high conflict and they just don't settle down, they can't get along.
So Tina, what would be some skills that like really high conflict parents that are parallel parenting, what skills might they learn at cooperative parenting?
Well, if there's similar life skills, regardless of the content, looking at yourself and be able to manage yourself spreads everywhere. So, even through parallel parenting, you might hear what the other parent has a decision they have made, and still being able to process that in an effective way and to remind themselves that, okay, there's a parallel parenting for a reason, and I'm not then going to pick up the phone and lay into this person, or because this process has been put in place. And so it's very similar skills, harder to practice as the situations get harder, but it's why it's even more important to tap into what your brain has the power to do and to be able to override what that initial reaction might be.
So do parents learn that if the kid comes home and says, wow, I had a terrible time at mom's, mom did this and that, and then, dad could get triggered or worried, do parents learn, like, how do you handle that kind of a situation to not get pulled into?
Sure, absolutely. I mean, there's such a fine skill to be able to talk to your child about what's going on in their other home without criticizing or bad-mouthing the other parent. So rather than, yep, I get it, lived with your mom for 20 years, kind of, either joining with them or getting upset and taking over the emotional zone of the room, to be able to talk to your child about what is going on over there that's upsetting to them by listening, empathizing, coming up with solutions, just as you would if they came home from school and said someone was mean to me on the playground, or my teacher did this, or I don't like when so-and-so did that. We always want our kids to be able to come to us no matter how old they are, to be able to talk through what's going on in their lives. And this is one other way we can help them, as long as we're doing it in very tight boundaries with our delivery.
And I would imagine that is so hard for some parents.
Right.
And I've even seen, like, sometimes I worry about parents, attitude and tone, that they're saying these words to the kids, but somehow their attitude and tone is not matching.
Right.
Like, that is such a struggle.
So self-awareness is a big deal here. And if we're not self-aware, we're just letting it out.
And when you have, this parallel parenting going on, doesn't that change the dynamic and the power that the child has? Doesn't the child become much more powerful because the parents are not talking? And so how would I know what happened at mom's house? I'm not talking to mom.
Right.
I mean, if the kid comes back and says mom is doing something that we've all agreed she's not allowed to do, the boyfriend's coming over or something like that, and the kid says it to me and I can't contact the parent. How do you resolve those kind of situations without going back to the lawyer?
Very hard to resolve. That the higher the conflict, the more the parallel parenting, the more unanswered questions there are, which brings so much fear. And so that would be, as the parent, getting themselves into therapy and figuring out how to resolve that with themselves without being able to really make those changes in the other household. That's the importance of having at least one parent who is willing to look at themselves and work at being reasonable and and softening that and really trying to look at their co-parent
So
as
if
a
one
human.
parent starts to change, does that ever have an impact and start to help the other parent to change?
It can. I see it all the
yeah,
time.
I would imagine you
Yeah,
would.
it's all small victories too.
Yeah, yeah.
So one parent, she hadn't said thank you to her co-parent for months. I mean, this is something we learn when we're
yeah.
2. I know, you say thank you, you know, and she hadn't done it. And
But he
so-
doesn't deserve it.
Right, right. And
he hasn't
right,
earned it.
Right, and that was her shift. One of her
Yeah.
shifts through the program is that she started to say thank you at the end of her emails, and you know, it's just those little. Sometimes if they're face to face, I just say like, "Have a good day," you know, ending graciously.
Yeah.
Matters.
I had a very tough mediation one time, and I ended up taking the husband outside and taking a little walk around the block with him because he was so upset. And I said to him, I said, you know, you've stumped the mediator. I got nothing left here. We've tried everything. And so he's looking at me, and then we're walking together, and then I go, actually, there's one thing we haven't tried. And he goes, what's that? I said, generosity. You know, why don't you, I mean, is there anything among these things you want that you're willing to give up? How about we walk back in there and we say, you know what, I thought about it, and that thing that I really wanted, I'm going to give to you. And he did that, and then she said, well, if you'll do that, I'll do this. And all the dominoes fell, and we didn't finish it that session, but the next session we did complete the case.
Yeah.
But, I mean, the idea of actually giving something is so hard when you're so hurt.
It is.
Why would I give you anything? You just made my life miserable, and every time I see you, I'm reminded of that pain.
Right.
So why would I be helpful or nice to you?
Well, the biggest thing I say in response, because parents ask the same thing, is that other parent is going to be parenting your children. And so if you leave them with a kindness or a softness, they will typically relax and just be better parents. But if you leave them with the attack or leave them with the name call, they're going to be more upset, and they won't be as effective as parents. And so you take a look at your picture of your children right before you have that interaction, or you know, things like that to help them to resolve that. That's a great point.
And I like to tell parents, and I know they don't always believe me, and maybe it isn't always true, but I really want to believe that we are all doing the best that we can. If we could do differently, we would. So I really do believe that people are doing the best that they can, and at the same time, maybe they do need to do better and try harder and be more motivated. But in this moment, they really are doing the best that they can. And if you can keep that in mind, it kind of takes away the judgment and the criticism of the other parent, and maybe even themselves. Like, you know, if you think, I am doing the best that I can right now.
Right.
And I need
But
to do
even
better.
asking that question makes you, I would imagine, makes you examine what you're doing.
Yes.
Because am I doing the best I can?
Yeah.
Or am I just acting out because I'm angry?
Yeah.
You know?
Right.
I mean,
But that might be the best you can do in the moment, and
right.
you still need to do better.
But giving that thought
Yes.
could be the interruption
Yes.
that prevents the really bad behavior.
Right. Yeah. And we really honor that through the program where everybody's at. You know, if you can't have a picture of your co-parent up on the mantle anymore so your kids can see it, that's okay. That's understandable. But at the very least, if you could not say anything negative or critical about the other parent in front of the child, that's the bare minimum, you know. And then you can add in, how do you have that conversation with your kids? You know, sometimes you just can't, and that's okay. Just don't say anything negative, you know.
Yeah.
I want to bring up the on that topic.
Yeah.
When you say something negative about the other parent in front of your kid or to your kid, you have to remember that your child sees themselves as part mom and part dad. And so when you're talking badly about dad, they wonder the part that is similar in them, like to dad, is that bad? And you know, most families say, oh, you do that just like your mom, or oh, you do that just like your dad. And it might not be a bad thing, it might be a good thing. You know, you're very creative like one of your parents, or you know how to build things like one of your parents, you're good at math because of one of your parents. But there was a, what's the name of that video?
Split. I was going
Split.
to mention it.
So
I'm
there's
glad
a
you
video
brought it
called
up.
Split that was done by this woman who interviewed a bunch of these little kids who were going through divorce, and she put it together very creatively with music and cartoons and stuff. Well, she went back 10, 12 years later and interviewed those same kids. And we all got to see it at a conference a couple of years ago, and hopefully it'll come out to the public soon. But there was one little boy in that thing that had the entire room of like 200 people in tears, because he talked about how his mother would always talk badly about his dad, and that he wondered if he wasn't bad too, just like his dad. So it's your anger at the other parent is understandable, your hurt, your frustration, your betrayal, whatever, but it shouldn't be reflected in front of your kids, because then they wonder if there's something bad about them. And I think the other thing I always tell parents is, you know, your kids, especially little kids, you as parents, you're their biggest role models, you're their biggest idols, you're their best friends, I mean, they want to talk to you and share everything with you. So if they come home from the other parent's house and they're all excited and they say, oh, we went and did that, we went and petted goats at the zoo, you know, and you just kind of like give them a, oh, yeah, okay, fine, I always wanted him to take us to the zoo. Then they're going to learn really quickly that you don't want to hear anything good that happens in the other parent's household. So number one, you're only going to hear the bad stuff, so you're going to think it's horrible over there when it's not. So take that all with a grain of salt. And the other thing is your kids are just going to learn not to tell you everything. And that's the last thing as a parent you want to do. You want to be the sane, calm, Rock of Gibraltar parent that will allow their kids to express to you their thoughts, feelings, and beliefs when they're 5 and when they're 15 and when they're 20. And they will do that if you're the non-judgmental parent and you're willing to listen and have that discussion with them. And you don't really care what the other parent's doing. Okay, you can't control what the other parent's doing. You can only control your own behavior. So be the best parent that you can be. And your kids will figure it out. Either they'll have 2 great parents or they'll have one, you know, because if the other parent's a personality disordered parent or has a lot of traits of a personality disordered person, they're likely not going to change. So you better change. You better be the one that's the Rock of the Gibraltar, because that's who the child will gravitate to as they get older, because they can freely express themselves to you. So don't worry so much about what the other parent's doing. Focus on what you're doing and your relationship with your children, and let them work out their relationship with the other parent.
And that video split is actually online, because I Googled it the other day. So I think if people Google split and co-parenting, it will come up and they'd be able to see it.
You will get a lot of other stuff with split, like there's some kind of movie, and there's a few other things, but if you Google it and you look around, you'll find it, and you can download it for, I think, a fairly small fee online and watch it. It's very helpful. But I've never forgotten that little boy saying that, and like I said, there was a whole room of professionals watching this, these outtakes that she was putting together, and we were all just like grabbing tissues off the table. So
very powerful.
Yeah.
So Tina, if folks would like more information about cooperative parenting, what is your website?
It is cooperativeparentingsd.com. So the SD is in San Diego. So cooperativeparentingsd.com.
And your phone number?
760-436-3039.
Great. So yeah, if folks have questions, it's a great workshop. I do refer people to that workshop often, and I get great feedback. And I've had clients in therapy who have taken the workshop and they will quote stuff to me that they've learned. So I know that it's working.
Yeah.
All right, and again, I want to remind everybody, we have our divorce options workshop the first Saturday of every month, and the next one is July 6th in Carmel Valley. Our website, collaborativefamilylawsandiego.com, or give us a call, 858-472-4022. And you can find my website at divorcecounselingcenter.com. Shawn Skillin is at ShawnSkillinLaw.com. Mark Hill, PACDivorce.com. And any final thoughts about cooperative parenting, co-parenting, any words of wisdom?
It's a process, not an event, as have someone who's experienced it. It changes as they get older, and you should be willing to change as it gets older, not be so rigid. I remember when my son got to be a teenager, I still was adamant about him coming over during the week until I realized he never left his room except to call his friends or ask for pizza. And so what was the point of me driving an extra 40, 50 miles to take him so he would just, and then take him back to school next morning? It was pointless. So I had to adjust and realize that because I was seeing him 2 days less every 2 weeks, that wasn't because I was a bad parent.
And on the other side of that, I want to say sometimes parents complain about having to do all the exchanges that's a perfect time when you've got your kid in the car to connect with them and have conversations.
Yeah.
So,
Right.
you know, I love that exchange time when parents think, oh, I'm just in the car driving, but yeah, it's a great time to connect with your kid and find out how their day was.
Right.
If you can get those earbuds out.
Yes.
Yeah.
Yeah.
You know, it all comes
Exactly.
down to, can you or please make a choice to love your child versus hate the other parent.
Yeah,
And if we're
that's a good way to
moving
think
in
of it.
that direction, then it's a little bit easier to guide.
That's
we
great.
went through
That's
that.
something great to keep in mind.
So I'll add to that the saying that my mother used to say, which she didn't live by, but she said, hate does more harm to the vessel in which it is stored than it does to the object upon which it is poured.
like
All that being said, my mother, long after she could no longer recognize me because she had dementia, still remembered that she was pissed off at my dad. And they'd been divorced since I was 5, so don't do that. Don't. I mean, life is too short. People don't hold on to that anger and hatred. Just, you know, let it go.
So our next Facebook Live show is July 18th at 10 a.m. Please join us here, and we will look forward to seeing everyone on July 18th. Thank you.